Hello, friends. My name is Reverend Kendal Brown, and I currently live in Baltimore, Maryland, and I am the brand founder of 228 Grant Street Candle Company. I'm delighted to be with you in this virtual space, excited to share a little bit about my journey in social entrepreneurship and this long, winding road that has brought me to this place that is fulfilling and soul satisfying. So I want to begin by sharing one of many stories, one of several stories. I grew up in the bustling metropolis of Danville, Virginia. It's on the southern border of Virginia. My home was less than 10 minutes from the North Carolina border. I grew up in both a Baptist church and also a Pentecostal church. My immediate family attended a Baptist congregation, and I was a musician there. I played piano, grew up singing in the choir. But because I loved music so much, I also started to attend the church of my father's side of the family, which was a Pentecostal church. And I loved that church because they had drums and our church didn't have drums, and the young people sang and with a lot more fervor than they did in my Baptist congregation. And so I would leave the Baptist congregation and then get someone to drop me off at my paternal family's congregation on Sunday afternoons, because they would just be getting started at 12 noon and 1 p.m. They were just getting going. So one of the things that would take place in the Pentecostal church that didn't happen in the Baptist church, there was something called tarry service. And in tarry service, folks would be normally gathered around the altar and praying to receive a personal infilling of the Holy Spirit. They would be praying for a personal touch. And this would go on for an hour or 2 hours, depending on when it was happening. And it was a time of deep prayer, and folks really honed in on getting something from God in that moment that they wanted to receive, which was tangible evidence of the Holy Spirit that would be evidenced by speaking in tongues in this particular congregation. And there would be these saintly mothers, these normally older women or women who were seasoned in the faith. They would be like midwives, doing what was called praying you through. Sometimes there would be one praying mother on one side of you while you had kneeled down at the altar, and then on the other side there would be another mother. And then sometimes it would be confusing instructions from the mothers. You would have one mother on one side saying, okay, hold on. And they would be clapping their hands and setting a rhythm. Hold on, hold on, hold on. And then on the other side, there would be another mother who'd be giving a totally opposite set of instructions. Let go, let go, let go, let go, let go. And that, it was so, to an outside person, it was extremely chaotic. But as I've grown older, I often reflect on those times, which are near and dear to me. I'm in a different space spiritually, in some ways, and in some ways I'm not. But the takeaway from that experience was that getting something moving forward, advancing, deepening one's spirituality, opening oneself to something new involves both holding on and letting go. And that really symbolizes what I want to share tonight about my own journey. It is an experience of both holding on, finding out what things need to be held on to, and also what needs to be let go of. As I stated, I am the founder of 228 Grant Street. It's a candle company. I went to undergrad, North Carolina A&T, finished at Avery College, and went straight from undergrad to seminary, knowing that I was called to ministry, knowing that pulpit ministry, parish ministry was what I was called to. Went in with that full assurance, that knowledge that parish ministry was what I was called to, and my entire life had been built around that understanding. I was a different kind of kid. I collected programs from churches, and I would I had them in a shoebox, and I collected them, and I would make out my own program for what the service order would be when I was a pastor. And this was when I was a child, 12, 13, 14. And I was a different kind of child. I knew that I was called to ministry. I had relatives, numerous relatives who were in ministry, and I studied them, and I knew that was my path and was my journey. And I would end up one day pastoring a church. Went to seminary, and one of my first lessons, one of my first seminars was was facilitated by the late Dr. Miles Jones, who was the preaching professor, our intro to preaching professor. And in one of the first lectures, he said something that shook me to my core. He said that what you're going to do over these next 3 years will be null and void if it's not coming from a place of authenticity. If it's not flowing from the core of who you are, then it will be null and void. And it shook me. It shook me for a number of reasons. It shook me primarily because I was hiding. I was a closeted gay man, and went to seminary with that on the back burner, with the belief I had said as I entered seminary, God, if you deal with that, then I will deal with your business, what you are calling me to. But I can't deal with this whole sexuality thing. I have prayed, I have fasted, and I can't do anything about it. But I know that I felt at the time that it was wrong, and that it was just the burden that I was called to bear. But that first lecture shook me to my core. And from that, it put me on the path to embracing my whole authentic self. And I began the process of slowly coming out as a gay man to my peers in seminary, to my professors, to my pastor where I was doing field education. And that was a liberating journey. And then I graduated and went back in the closet because I needed a job. And my first job in ministry was in a congregation in Washington, D.C., where I was hired to be kind of a church administrator and also music staff. And long story short, I was outed by someone who found out that I was gay, and I was fired shortly after 6 months within starting at that congregation. And it shouldn't have happened, but it was the best thing that could have ever happened. So that set me on another path to reconciling my ministry and my sexuality. From there, moved to California to study with Bishop Yvette Flunder because there were some things about ministry that I didn't get that I knew I would need as an out gay man doing ministry. So did a kind of post-seminary internship in San Francisco at City of Refuge, and was a life-changing experience. All of that in preparation to start a church. And several years later, moved back to the East Coast, to Washington, D.C., to start a congregation in Washington, D.C. And City of Refuge, Washington, D.C. was off to a wonderful start. We grew more quickly than our infrastructure that was in place. And I got burned out quickly. Within 3 years, I didn't have the passion or the drive. I was constantly pulling from a dry place, ministering from an empty well, as we would say in the Baptist church. My well was empty, and went to therapy and talked to colleagues and did everything I knew how to do to get out of that dry place, and just could not do it. And from there, realized that I was not happy. And the thing that I had worked my whole life to do, I couldn't do. And I was crushed. Went into experienced a bout of major depression as a result of things falling apart. A relationship also fell apart during that time. And my life I didn't know who I was, because all of my life had been built around becoming Pastor Kendal Brown. Everything was invested in that. And I was crushed because I had told God, if you handle these things, I will handle your things. I had been working in theological education for a number of years. It started while I was in California. I was bivocational, started working at Pacific School of Religion. And when I moved back to the East Coast, started working at Wesley Seminary in Washington, D.C., and enjoyed working in theological education. But I knew that I was called to be a pastor. I just knew it like the skin on my body, like the nose on my face. I knew it. And was trying to do this bivocational thing, and my pastoral ministry fell apart. Found a job at Lancaster Seminary. They were looking for a director of admissions, and spent 5 years there. Met my partner, person who became my partner, and later became my husband. And things kind of fell into place at Lancaster Seminary, and I found a lane and healed from that whole scenario of that cataclysmic disappointment that happened when my church plant fell apart and I couldn't perform as the founding pastor. And was on that road, and was working in theological education, and did some amazing things at Lancaster Seminary with increasing population of Black students, and partnerships with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and other organizations, the Proctor Conference. We were able to change the face of the entire seminary, and was grateful for that work. But still, there was something in me that was unfulfilled. There was a core that was saying, there is something else. All of my adult life, I had been, back up a little bit, I was an artsy kid. I was, in addition to playing piano, I was always drawing. I was always, my my ask for Christmas would be a calligraphy set, or in my mind, I wanted an easy bake oven, which I didn't get. But um, but I was a really artsy kid. I was also creative with my hands. I was a tinkerer. My favorite show as 10, 12-year-old, I would set my schedule, the Saturday schedule, around This Old House on PBS. I was a nerdy, nerdy artsy kid. And all of my adult life, I would literally be driving in my car at least once a week, and I'd look down at my hands and say, God, I'm supposed to be doing something with my hands. And so I said, okay, I play piano, maybe that's it, but I felt like there was something else. And I moved away from playing piano because I was surrounded by all of these incredible musicians, and I didn't feel like my talent was what theirs was. And so I let that go. And 20s and 30s, into my 30s, I'd say, God, I'm supposed to be doing something with my hands. And I knew it. There was just this deep yearning. And fast forward, candles have always been a part of my contemplative process. So whenever I had to write a sermon, or whenever I needed to unwind, I would light a candle. Get home in the evening, candle would be the first thing. My mood is impacted by scent and fragrance. I have a very keen sense of smell, and that has always been the case. One day in 2015, I walked into a department store and I picked up a candle. I always walk straight to the candle section. I picked up a candle. I literally heard the voice of God. No one called 911. I literally heard a voice when I picked up the candle say, you can make this. It was nowhere on my radar. Absolutely nowhere. I had done some things in art class in high school. We had carved candles and things like that, but making a candle was nowhere on my radar. But I've been a farmer's market junkie for much of my life. We went to flea markets when I was a kid, and I carried that into my adult life, going to farmers markets on Saturdays and Sundays. It's what I love to do. So I had been going to farmers markets, and I would sometimes I got to know a lot of the vendors, especially when I lived in Washington, D.C. And sometimes I would ask them, how did you structure your life to be able to do this? I mean, you're doing what you love, and how did you get to this place? And I was interviewing artisans for a number of years, and didn't know why. I was just curious with that way of life. And there in that store, all of it started to come together. All of my interest as an artsy kid, as a creative who had put all of those things on the back burner, as someone who is intrigued by scent, as someone who loves candles, who's that's part of my contemplative process. It all started to come together, and I went home, and like a madman, I got on Google how to make a candle, and I started ordering some basic supplies and some things, and I started tinkering, and I started making some candles. And from that, the idea of becoming a candle maker started coming. And I made some and sent some to my mom and my sister-in-law, and they loved them. And then I said, well, this can be a hobby. I can do something with this. And maybe one day sell them at a farmer's market. And I thought of a name, 228 Grant Street, which was the home of my maternal grandparents. And I made some candles. And a couple months later, I had some labels made. They were very bad labels. Had some labels made and went to a little boutique, a Black-owned boutique here in Baltimore, and they placed an order. And I was in business as a candle maker. Then a few months after that, one of my favorite home goods and gift shops in Baltimore, it's no longer in business. It was a casualty of the pandemic. It was called Trove. High-end gifts and just well-curated gift items. They placed an order, and they said that they never place orders from walk-ins because they get folks peddling candles all the time. And I knew at that moment that I had something. I knew that I had something of value, something that was different, and something that was born out of a deep place within my being that could connect with other people could connect with. So from that, I ramped up, and a few months later had to move out of the house, and because I was making them in the kitchen, and it quickly took over the living room and took over the kitchen. And I rented space because I'd worked in denominational life. Also, I knew that, churches, older mainline churches have all this space that's unused. And so I rented space from a United Methodist congregation that had a whole educational wing that wasn't being used. And so I was making candles in a church and having the time of my life. And it grew and grew and grew and grew. And did the Jazz Fest here in Baltimore, DC area. And by the end of the year was in probably maybe 8 stores, 10 stores. And it like doubled every year from there on. And a couple years later, a year and a half later, I was able to quit. By that time, I was working part-time for the United Church of Christ as an associate conference minister doing in charge of new church development and congregational vitality for the entire conference, but it was a part-time position. So I had the time to grow my business and also do the work of the conference as well. But the business grew to the point that I was able to leave that position. And fast forward, the business grew every year, was doing more markets, more pop-ups, and was extremely busy. And beginning of 2020, we did our first major trade show in Atlanta, Georgia at America's Mart, where folks go to pick up wholesale accounts and where buyers come from all over North America to find new products. By the time we left there, we were in probably 80 stores. We picked up about 40 new accounts at that trade show, and we were coast to coast. And then came COVID. Packed up everything and moved back into the house because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I had a part-time assistant, and I said, well, I'll be in touch, based on how things go. And so I didn't know what was going to happen. So I get notifications on the phone whenever folks place an order on the online store. And my husband and I were sitting, we were watching the news all day long, and get notifications on the phone when there's a sale. And now that the stores were closed, was getting a few orders. The stores that we were in was getting a few orders. It had started to increase a little bit, but it was manageable. We were sitting on the sofa one day, and this was right after George Floyd had been murdered. And we were watching the news about watching all of that unfold, and started hearing ding ding, ding 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 ding. I was like, what in the heck is going on? Where are all these sales coming from? And then I did some research and analysis, figured out it was coming from Twitter, and then figured out that New York Magazine, the strategist, had posted Black brands to support during the pandemic and during the uprising. And that had went viral and had been retweeted like 45,000 times. We were mentioned along with several other Black-owned small brands. We did like a year of business in one day with no inventory. Our amber jars, which you can see in the background, most of them come from China because unfortunately they're no longer made here in the States. So we have to import a lot of the glass that we use. We didn't have anything. We had, maybe a few hundred jars. And I called my assistant, and she came to the house, and we spent time on the phone trying to find whatever jars and supplies we could find, and we made it happen. And I put a note on our website saying, supply chains are crazy right now. Orders will be processed as quickly as possible. And we were able to process those orders in about a month. We did about a year of business, and things picked up from that point, so much so that we had to move back into our little studio space. And from that, things calmed down a little bit from that huge uptick. And then was sitting at my desk a few weeks after we had caught our breath, sitting at my desk and got an email. This is blah, blah, blah from the Today Show. We heard about your brand. We'd like to feature you in our Steals and Deals morning segment. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And a few weeks after that, we were featured on the Today Show in a morning segment, and we did 3 years of business in one day with no inventory. I have a business mentor who was kind of holding my hand, and he said, just don't throttle it. Put a note on your website saying that orders will be filled in 6 weeks, in 4 to 6 weeks, and you're going to get it done. And I called in some help. I had a friend who owns a bath soap company and shower gel and mixed body products here in Baltimore. And I said, I need some help. And she sent all of these elderly mothers from her church who were helping me put on labels, and their arthritic hands, the labels were sometimes crooked, and we were listening to gospel music, and I was crying, just so grateful for all of this unexpected, bounty that had happened. And we got it done in 6 weeks. And that was amazing. Caught our breath. And a couple of weeks later, sitting at the desk again, got an email. This is a producer from the ABC World News, David Muir's nightly news. We'd like to feature you tonight in our Made in America series. I was going to say no, because we had just finished sending all of those orders. And I was literally exhausted. I'd been working nonstop 7 days a week. And we did a team huddle, and they grabbed me and said, this is an unimaginable gift that we've been given. We're doing this. So we did it. So Wednesday night, The segment aired along with they featured our brand along with two other brands. We were the last one featured that night, so video aired, website exploded. We did 4 years of business one night. Next morning, I sent the producer an email saying, thank you for this amazing opportunity. It was absolutely amazing. We did 2,000 orders. Thank you, thank you, thank you. David Muir wrapped up Thursday night by saying, I just want to just close tonight's show by saying, thank you for supporting 228 Grant Street. You placed over 2,000 orders and you helped this small business become sustainable during this pandemic. Thank you. We did the same amount of orders that night, Thursday night. Friday night, he did a wrap up of the week of his Made in America segment and thanked everyone for supporting small businesses. And our video was the only video he showed again Friday night. So it happened again Friday night. Absolutely amazing. So from that, we were able to just pivot and expand quickly. And we're able to grow our staff and grow our give. Giving has always been a central part of our identity. Up on our wall, it says our brand story, who we are, and our commitments to our community are, which for me is the LGBTQ plus community, and folks through TFAM, we're connected to folks who are on the continent of Africa doing amazing work around queer equality and human rights. Folks who literally put their lives on the line. And so we have been supporting works, supporting building community centers in various countries in West Africa and South Africa, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Kenya. So East Africa, we have been extremely active in our efforts there. So we've been grateful. And also working with organizations who are working to alleviate food deserts here in Baltimore, the Black Church Food Security Network. We've been able to support their work. So from all of those things, we were able to increase the ways in which we are connected in community and the ways in which we're giving back to community. And it has been an incredible journey. And all of that is from that moment in that department store of hearing, you can make this, when I picked up a candle. And it has been an amazing journey. And there's so much more that I could tell about things that have unfolded. But there's some takeaways from this journey that I'd like to share. The lessons learned from this journey since 2016 that I'd like to share with you. And the first takeaway is to take seriously your creative whims, those deep longings, those recurring voices, those you need to be doing something with your hand voices. There's something in your hands, and I don't know what that is for you, but more often than not, when we hear those things, we always say, well, it's not the right time. I don't have the right skill set. I didn't go to business school. Still get a lot of things wrong in terms of running a business. But I took my creative whims and my creative longings seriously in that moment in a way that I never had. And I followed the breadcrumbs that led me down a path that said, now it's about candles. And then it's about listening to, you can make this, and then doing something with that. And that turning into something that was absolutely incredible. And then the second takeaway from all of those experiences is that none of my experiences were wasted. So I've had a lot of positions. I've had a lot of jobs and twists and turns, and trying to figure things out along the way. Have worked in several different sectors. I've named the seminaries that I've worked in. I've worked in three congregations. I've worked in music ministry in a number of places, and all the while there were places that were just still unfulfilled, and places where things just did not quite come together. But the thing that this experience has taught me is that all of those experiences have in some way informed the work that I'm doing now as an entrepreneur. The marketing that I had to do as a church planter, the things that I had to do running a program for Black queer seminarians that I started along with Bishop Flunder. Had to learn how to create a website, learn how to create an online application, and all of those things I used now in my journey as an entrepreneur. So none of those experiences. I worked when I was fired from that first congregation, when I was outed. I worked for a recruiting firm, and I hated it. I was recruiting accountants. I had to do cold calls, and as an introvert, I would go home exhausted from doing cold calls all day long. That whole experience gave me the ability to walk into a store and say, I am a candle maker, and this is my product. Would you like to have some samples of my product? And so cold calls are nothing to me, because I had that job that I absolutely hated. So all of those experiences have led to, being able to do what I'm doing now, without any fear, without any trepidation, because I've done all of those things. And then the last thing that I would leave you with is life can truly blossom when you find your people. One of the most amazing things about this journey is that I have become a part of an amazing group of entrepreneurs and creatives here in the Baltimore area, and actually across the country. And I have relied heavily on that network of entrepreneurs who have taught me how to get labels made, who've taught me how to troubleshoot, who've taught me how to find the right accountant, who've taught me, how to do all of these things that I did not know how to do. And so life has really blossomed, not individually, but it has blossomed in community. So this is a little bit about my journey as a social entrepreneur, and as a minister, as an artist, as a musician. I have found riches, not financial riches. I have found quality of life riches in niches. And my prayer for you, for all of you watching and engaging, is that you would be fully open to the holding on and the letting go that comes with experiencing an expansive journey, when you dare to say, what's in my hand? God, I'm going to use what's in my hand. I'm going to discern, and I will not let go until you bless me with knowing what is in my hand. I pray God's peace upon you, and I look forward to the dialogue together when we share together in our session together. God bless you.